Hi, everybody. I'm Pastor Sarah Stobie from Bayshore Lutheran Church. This is week 3 of Biblical Lit. So this week's readings are Genesis 46 through Exodus chapter 16. Yes, I do know it's a lot. I do, but I'm trying to keep my vlogs as short as possible. So I'm only going to be taking a little bit out of each week's reading. And so this week's emphasis, if you will, is Exodus 16. So if you haven't read Exodus 16, you know the drill. You can pause me and read it now, or you can go back to it later. Okay, thanks for staying on. So Genesis reading, it begins 46 with Jacob taking the entire clan, the entire everything, all the sons, the grandsons, the granddaughters, all the property, all the animals down into Egypt. And then Exodus begins with the familiar story of how the Hebrew people were enslaved by a Pharaoh who did not know Joseph. And we immediately enter into the story of Moses, Moshe, which it sounds like moisture, doesn't it? Moshe, because Moses was named Moses for being drawn out of the water. And he is basically adopted by the Pharaoh's extended family. I know you know all this. I know that you are familiar with the story of Moses, whether it's from previous readings, homilies over the years. Maybe you've even had a Bible study on the book of Exodus, and maybe you've watched some good movies. Now, hear me well. I see no problem in watching good documentaries and good movies. In fact, one I recommend is The Prince of Egypt. The music is divine. I think they do a great job representing the plagues, which you are reading through right now. And I also think that they do a really good job with handling the arc of Moses as a character. So that's an unofficial plug, but I do like that movie for representing the plagues and Moses. But now we're in chapter 16, and chapter 16 is really important, and I'm assuming you've read it. Like I said earlier, just a few seconds ago, I'm assuming you read it, so let me give you a quick summary here of some thoughts. In chapter 16, Moses is now with the entire body of Israel. He has them gathered. They've left Pharaoh's control. And basically, it's the chapter where we see God literally providing daily bread. Now, in the evening, we're told quails are available for meat. But in the morning, when the Israelites wake up, when the Hebrews wake up, they find covered all over everything this substance, which they immediately say, what is it? And that is where we get the word manna. Manna, the bread-like substance, which the Israelites can gather every day to fill their belly. Now, it's probably not great tasting, but it's filling, and you might not know this, but they had it for 40 years. And it begins here in this chapter, Exodus 16. And what we understand is from Moses and from God, because God is directly talking to Moses all this time, is that the Israelites can collect for 6 days. For 6 days, they can collect this manna-like substance, but they only collect what they need for the day. Oh, let me reverse that for a second. They collect what they need for the day, except the 6th day. On the 6th day, they can collect a double portion, because on the 7th day, they are to rest. God tells them that it's a Sabbath, that it's a holy day. They are to rest. So for 5 days, they collect what they need for the day. The 6th day, they can collect what they need for 2 days. But on the 7th day, they are to not collect at all, and they are just simply to rest. That includes them, their slaves, their helpers, their animals, everything. They're just to rest. I love this. Now, you might not have known that already this idea of Sabbath begins this early, but here in Exodus 16, God introduces several things. First of all, God introduces the fact that I give you what you need. I give you the meat, the quail. I give you the manna, the bread. You collect what you need. Do not collect more. In fact, we even hear how if they collected more, that it would be, sorry to say it, but covered with maggots and other type bugs. It would be inedible. So if they were greedy, if they didn't trust that God was giving them what they needed, if they tried to hoard it, actually God would then literally destroy their hoarding. He would destroy what they had collected that they didn't need. So in this way, Israel learns to trust God. Israel learns that they are to trust God's promises, and they are also to only take what they need. Take daily bread. Now that phrase should trigger some memories for you because it literally is what Jesus teaches. Jesus teaches in the Lord's Prayer this concept of daily bread. And it literally is about Exodus 16, this time of manna, when God provided daily bread for the Israelites, for the Hebrews in the wilderness, and they were to consume what they needed. They were to collect only what they needed, a double portion the night before Sabbath, but that was all they needed to do. They didn't need to worry about the next following days because God would provide. So when Jesus teaches the disciples to pray for daily bread, they would have understood this. They would have understood the concept of only pray for what you need. Pray that God provides what you need for the day. Now, Martin Luther, he expands this beautifully. Martin Luther expands it in the Catechism to not just be bread or food. Martin Luther expands it to be clothing, and my favorite, the happy spouse. That Martin Luther lists actually several things of what he considers daily bread to be. But if you look through that list, it really is what makes your life good for that day. It's not about hoarding up treasures to be used in the future. It's about accepting what God has given you that day and allowing that day of accepting what God has given you to be enough. To trust that when you wake up the next day, just like the Israelites did, that manna will appear. And that's what Jesus teaches in the Lord's Prayer. Give us today our daily bread, God. Give us only what we need for the day, because tomorrow we trust that you will give us again what we need. Now, Jesus has to expand this. He's a lot like Moses. Poor Moses gets asked a lot of questions. Why, what ifs? So did Jesus. And so this is where the teaching of loving your neighbor comes in. Because if you are fortunate enough to have a lot of daily bread, let's say that your profession gives you more money than you need to survive for the next day. Let's say that you are blessed with a bumper crop of corn or olives or whatever it might be today and back in ancient times. Jesus said to share with your neighbor, that to love God as you much as love yourself and to love your neighbor. And by loving your neighbor, you shared the extra daily bread. By doing that, you are not hoarding. By doing that, nothing will be spoilt for the next day. And you are again trusting that God will give you what it is you need. And maybe God will continue to give you more so that you can continue to love and help your neighbor more. This is the heart of Jesus' teaching, that we are to accept our daily bread, and that if we are fortunate enough to get more than we do need, that we pass it on to others who are in need. And this is, like I said, Jesus' message in a nutshell. And it literally comes from Exodus 16. I love this story. I hope that you do too. I hope that it rings some bells for you and maybe has you thinking about what it is you need day to day to live and how you might be able to help others who have even less daily bread than you do. Thank you for joining me. I hope to see you again next week for week 4.